What's going on, everybody? With the recent changes to the Chambers of Xerix, as well as challenge mode raids, decreasing the rates of the arcane and dexterous prayer scrolls, and increasing the drop chance for just about any other purple, but specifically the ancestral pieces, and of course, everybody wants to go after the twisted bow, now is the time to jump into challenge modes, which I've already done a video on. But challenge mode, challenge is in its name, so it can be quite difficult, and maybe you're looking for something to transition into challenge modes, and maybe your gear just isn't quite up to it just yet. Well, luckily, you can essentially practice the challenge mode in all the rooms by making a party and unchecking challenge mode. Obviously, we're not going to be doing that. And under map layout, we're going to be doing the full layout. This is the equivalent of challenge mode. The layout's going to be exactly the same as if it was a CM, but in terms of the mob damage and defense and things of that nature, it's going to be the same as a regular Chambers of Xeric. So it's good practice, and we're going to gear up and showcase that now. Alright, I've organized my gear. Let's quickly go over it real quick. We're keeping things very minimal here, and more than likely, if you're watching this video, you actually probably have better gear than I do. The three most expensive pieces of gear we have right now is the Dragon Warhammer, which is very important for defense reduction, our Osmumtum's Fang, which is going to get us through the rooms more than anything, but we also have the Whip, in which we're going to use that for Olm for the 4-to-1 method. And the third most expensive thing is actually the blowpipe, which surprised me a little bit. This thing is 11.6 mil right now. Zora prices seem to fluctuate quite a bit. Like, I remember a time when they were really down bad. Anyways, we have a blowpipe as well as RCB for ruby bolts, and what's in the blowpipe is going to be amethyst dart. So it's pretty much not worth using a blowpipe unless you can get amethyst or dragon darts. For our range armor, we have the Huey Caudalhide, but any hide would do. Ava's Assembler. Don't know if I mentioned the Fighter Torso and Obulegs just yet, and we are going to be camping a few pieces of gear, like Amulet of Fury, Serpentine Helm, Barrow's Gloves, Dragon Boots, as well as the Light Bear. Honestly, if you have, or obviously, if you have, some Zenite jewelry and things of that nature, definitely do bring those. But again, I'm keeping it very minimalistic here. Mage gear is just going to be the Trident and Mystics, very old pieces of gear. We have Burning Claws, Book of the Dead for Thralls, Salve Amulet for Mystics, Pickaxe for Guardians, and then we're even going to carry a Prayer Potion in just in case. And then, yeah, let's get started here. Alright, we're going to pre-pot. We are going to pre-pot an Anti-Venom, and this is something I always do. Oh, and of course we have the Extended Stamina as well. But pre-potting the Anti-Venom is something I always do, but I suppose technically with the Serpentine Helmet it's not necessary. But also, maybe you're not going to wear a Serpentine Helmet, maybe you'll wear a face guard or something like that instead. And I guess this will be a good test run to see how long this Tecton's going to take, how long Ice Demon's going to take, and how long Shaman Room is going to take. Will this pre-pot be long-lasting enough? So, again, the Osmumtum's Fang being one of our very high GP value items, this is going to carry us through this raid. But let's say you don't have the Osmumtum's Fang. At least in a regular baby CM, we're going to call this. A full layout is a baby CM. You really don't need a Fang because things in here don't have that quite high of a defense. So even just the Abyssal Whip will do. But I wouldn't say getting an Osmumtum's Fang is too difficult, despite it being one of the more pricey things here in our gear setup. But let's be honest, I think all our gear combined in this setup here is easily less than 50 mil. Maybe not even like 30 mil, who knows? But yeah, we're doing Tecton here, and we're going to be employing the same exact strategy we would in a CM, because as I mentioned, this is a baby CM. It's just a regular Chambers of Xeric, but the layout is like a challenge mode, and that is why this is going to be good practice. And depending on your gear, you might as well just get used to this until you can afford or until you pull better gear from the game, from other raids, and then you can go ahead and start looking at challenge mode chambers instead of just regular chambers. We just walked right through that orb. Interesting. Oh, we didn't have our Avas on. There's probably quite a few bolts on the ground right now. All right, that's one crystal done. Those are the only two crabs we smashed into place. The other ones we're gonna, or this third one, you know, we wanted to move to hit the mage one and then the void null one. We are gonna smash it now though into that 2 tile right there so that we can get it to bounce off and reflect over to this last crystal right here. So there's nothing too fancy, whether you're doing a CM or a regular layout. You're probably going to want to scav. You know, I think I mentioned this in previous CM videos, but even in a baby CM or in a full CM, time is never an issue. I mean, even more so in a baby CM, right? Like, you literally could AFK in here for as long as you want. So we're going to be scavving. And, well, absolutely nothing there. That's unfortunate. But we're going to be looking for planks, juice, and mushrooms. Got some planks there. Again, I do want to stress, you know, more than likely, even if you're an Ironman, you probably have better gear than I am using right now in this raid. Which, by the way, most of my budget runs or early game, mid game Ironman runs that I like to show off here, I typically make an exception and use an Avernic Defender, and that's because I never got around to getting a second Dragon Defender. Well, I recently took the initiative to do that, and boy did it take me a while to get. I went nearly 4 times the rate for the Dragon Defender. I was beginning to wonder if I was doing something wrong. But we got our hands on it now, so I can do better example videos using a Dragon Defender. Let's go ahead and put away these potions, and then let's get these this axe out. So also another note is, very clearly, we have a ton of inventory space. Now, this might not be the case for you because you might bring more switches, like a necklace switch, helmet switch, glove switch, boot switch. Although I will say the boots, you know what, actually, most people probably have Arania boots or Avernic treads these days. Even if you don't have any, like, Cerberus boots in the Avernic treads, the base ones are still very good. But we're using Dragon boots right now. But yeah, obviously the more switches you bring, the less inventory space you have. But if you're using a gear setup similar to what I am using right now, you can consider bringing more potions, more food, you know, to account for your mistakes and things of that nature if you so choose. But also just leaving yourself some inventory space can be very convenient. You know, we were able to pick up this axe and tinderbox very easily. So Ice Demon, not much to it. We're just going to get as much kindling as we can. And what that usually means is 2 full stacks of 28 and 2 braziers. And then from this point on, just as much as you can while keeping your eye on Ice Demon, the percentage draining there so that you can be ready in a timely fashion. So we're going to get a couple more chops here, and sometimes, you know, depending on your woodcutting level, and if you get lucky, you can just get another 28, honestly. We have 26 right there, and with just over 20% remaining until it pops, I'm going to go ahead and deposit. And then we're going to go ahead and take out the Overload, Prayer Enhance, and Reeve it. And then we're not going to Dragon Warhammer spec it, we're going to Dragon Claw spec it. If you've done Yama and you have some Surge Potions, that is something worth bringing in as well if you have the space for it, but we just neglected to do that. We're not too concerned about it. So you can see the claws are actually not too great here, and what you can do after dumping your specs is you can actually summon Mark of Darkness and use Dark Demon Bane, which, you know, we just splashed right there, but it is better than Burning Claws, I do want to say. I suppose this also varies on your specific gear setup. In Mystics, maybe, you know, we got the job done, right? But maybe run the DPS calcs just to really check on that. Alright, so we're going to be heading into... Oh, you know what? Did we not overload there? Or did that take so long that our overload ran out? And I'm actually not too sure what happened there. Okay, so I did equip my rune crossbow there, but the best DPS for most things, actually, is going to be our, oh, let's be careful here. Let's be careful here. Slightly panicking. But the blowpipe is better DPS than the crossbow in pretty much every situation. But we are going to be bringing the crossbow in for the Olm fight, just because of the method that we're going to be doing. Now, here's the downside, obviously, right? The blowpipe has terrible, terrible range. So I'm actually going to swap to the rune crossbow here. Now, this is a very bad example, and this was definitely just a result of me panicking, not accounting for the attack range of my weapons here. But you can see how I aggroed both shamans, and like I said, this is not the situation you want to put yourself in. If you can help it, you isolate the shamans and only do one at a time. But this is the downside of using a rune crossbow, which is what, like 7 tile range, 8 tile range? And then also the blowpipe, which is even less than that. This will just cause issues, so you do want to be a little bit more careful, I suppose. All right, let's calm down here and let's just... Yeah, we can't even hug the walls with the blowpipe, so that's something to consider as well. You know, maybe just use the rune crossbow just because it has better range than the blowpipe. So, for about half of the shaman room, this was a perfect example of what not to do. But there we go. We made it out alive. We're going to be picking up the Buchus here. And then we're going to be taking out the tools so that we can prep. But yeah, that shaman room was really quite funny. So that's something you have to think about. Obviously, I did not account for until I was in the moment, and I'm like, oh man, we better not plank here. All right, so we're going to get both patches down with Buchu. We don't need to plant anything else. We just need the Buchu. And go ahead and deposit all, and then... You know what? Usually I have a very specific system of how to prep, but we probably are going to need a little bit more revitalizations than usual. So, with that being said, I'm going to just get an inventory full of vials here. And then we're going to go ahead and deposit all. We'll take the spade out. We're going to want some juice and mushrooms out. And then... let's begin harvesting from the patches. So the typical numbers I use to prep in any CM, much less a baby CM, is 13 juice and 8 mushrooms. Juice is for brews, mushrooms are for revitalizations. So 13 to 8 is my usual ratio, but I'm going to prep a little bit more just because I know the current gear setup we're using is a bit underwhelming. But remember, we're not doing a CM, we're doing a baby CM, so maybe we won't need the extra supplies after all. But just to be safe, I'm going to go ahead and make 2 extra brews than usual and 2 extra revitalizations than usual. Doesn't hurt to over prep, and again, time is not a factor, especially when you're learning, right? But in general, time is not a factor, especially not in baby CM. Time is only a factor in the challenge mode edition, and even then, it's kind of a non-factor there. For reference, a solo CM, if you're looking to complete one for the first time, the time to beat is 1 hour and 10 minutes. So yeah, that is so much time. I've even AFK'd mid-raid for like 20 minutes at a time, and I still made the time. And also, I did run these CMs in kind of... okay, you know, that's a lie. I was going to say kind of similar gear, but I never used something as down bad as a rune crossbow. If you're only using a rune crossbow, I personally would not recommend doing CMs. I mean, maybe you can do some team CMs for fun, but even then, you're not really going to get too many points with the people you're raiding with. So I think the bare minimum would be a Bofa setup, but you know, not everybody wants to do Corrupted Gauntlet for a Bofa Crystal Armor setup before getting into raids. But this is just to show more than anything that the raid is accessible even before getting a Bofa. I mean, especially Chambers, this raid is very old content. This was released before Song of the Elves and Prifdinus, I do believe. I could be mistaken. All right. So we're going to take out all our stuff again, and there's some stuff we don't need, right? Like we don't need the Dragon Warhammer, we don't need the salve, pickaxe. We do want our defender. And then we're going to go ahead and bank the whip, actually, because we're going to be using the fang for pretty much every room from this point on. And then we're going to take the overload enhance back out. We're going to take revits out, and we're going to take a couple of restores as well. I mean, we have so much inventory space, we really don't have to be too worried about it. And we're going to be heading into Vanguard. Let's get our thrall going. And let's actually use the blowpipe here. Oh, a 27 max hit. Wow. I have no idea what our max hits are, so it would definitely help if you did know what your max hits are. That's actually pretty important. And we're going to put this trident on long range here so that we can reach that Vanguard. This green Vanguard, I say it every time when we make it to Vanguards, but the green range Vanguard is the only Vanguard that you can stand underneath and pretty much safe spot from. The other ones will maneuver around to find you, so do keep that in mind. Use that to your advantage. Okay, we're not going to reach this Vanguard from over there. We are going to reach it from here, though. Okay, we know the blowpipe max hit is a 27 while we're overloaded, so... Alright, let's just be very careful. Important thing with Vanguard's room is just to be patient. And because we have the light bearer on at all times, we have a ton of spec right now, so let's go ahead and use that. Fang is very, very strong. Again, going back on the gear, you're definitely going to want better gear than what I'm using right here, especially as you actually think about transitioning over from the regular chambers to challenge mode chambers. But this is good practice, the baby CMs, because you should be employing roughly the same strategies. And then once your gear improves, you can start thinking about doing challenge mode instead of regulars, and then, you know, you'll at least understand the room order, the mechanics, the strategy involved, and the transition will be much easier for you. So let's go ahead and get a fresh new overload and enhance. We're going to be picking up all the brews and revits as well. There we go. And then we actually have a couple of things in our inventory here that we shouldn't have kept on us, like the stamina, and we could have binned this prayer potion a while ago as well. We ended up not needing it at all. So we're going to create that one inventory space so that we can begin picking up grubs from these chests. And I mean, there's not much to this room, right? The general strategy here is to just make sure you feed the corrupted scavenger. You need 30 in a solo. And then what you really want to do is think ahead for the rest of the raid. So right now in shared, we're going to put away all our potions for now. In private, we're even going to bin that prayer potion I mentioned. We're going to take the specialty items. In our case, that's literally just a pickaxe and the salve amulet. And then for the Vespula room, now this is going to vary for the type of gear you have, but for our specific setup here, we're going to be using the trident, I think. So I said you want to really think ahead while you're working on this room. So one such thing is making sure our quick prayers are correct. For us, it's redemption augury. And then we're going to go ahead and take our potions back out. We're going to be mostly taking out revits and then really just have the one brew on you just in case you mess up. But you won't be needing it for Vespula. And then we'll be reorganizing our potion situation after Vespula. So let's go ahead. One more grub there, unfortunate. We're going to go ahead and re-overload right now. And the logic here is that we're going to make sure it doesn't expire in the Vespula room, which can be a little bit of a pain. Not the end of the world if it does. You just have to be patient. But ideally, you don't have to deal with that while you're in the Vespula room. We're gonna go ahead and sip our stamina here. And then, like I said, we're going to be using the Trident, but depending on your setup, you're more than likely going to be using a Bofa if you're kind of in more mid-gamey gear. But the strategy remains the same. You hit the portal, you proc your redemptions, you run back out. There's no need to rush this room right here. A lot of people, they try to feel like, or they feel like they have to try and rush, but that's really not the case. Just take your time. Now, I will say in challenge mode, using the Trident for this room is probably not going to be very good. Again, challenge mode, I think the very bare minimum is you want to use a Bofa. Something like a Dragon Hunter crossbow is possible as well, but that's like really pushing the limits. I think for the average player, using a Bofa is already pushing the limits. I think there's going to be a good amount of people out there that would just simply would not recommend you do challenge mode at all without a twisted bow. But that's kind of backwards thinking for an Ironman, right? Because it's like, aren't you wanting to do challenge mode now because of the increased odds of getting a twisted bow, right? So, just something to think about. All right, we're going to switch into our range gear here, and then we're going to go into the storage unit right here. Probably deposit a few rivets. We actually didn't end up using too many, and then we're going to want mostly brews, because this next room is going to hurt a good bit. It is going to be the Tightrope room. Now, the majors won't hurt too much, but it's really the rangers. Wow, the blowpipe range is so short, we have to maneuver all the way over here. Alright, with the Lightbearer camp and using a blowpipe, we should really make use of the specs more often to heal up. We'll try to keep that in mind. Now, something I didn't DPS calc is which weapon is actually going to be better at Vasa. I checked every other room, but I didn't check Vespula. I do wonder if our blowpipe will be better than the rune crossbow. Now, going back to the Shaman room, honestly, we discovered that there are varying reasons why you might want to use the rune crossbow over the blowpipe, even though it might not be as good DPS. And that's simply because of the attack range. Now, this ranger is very humble, all things considered. Okay, it just hit me at 23 there. But do keep in mind, in a challenge mode, that's going to hit like a max hit of a 43. So you do really want to be a lot more careful, a lot more attentive when you're doing the challenge mode edition. But we're kind of cruise controlling through this baby CM right now. Alright, we're going to transition into our melee gear here with the pickaxe equipped, which means our defender equipped, which means we actually have an extra inventory slot if we need it. But we're, honestly, we're looking very, very healthy with our brew stack here. If you really want to, you can also bin the extended stamina into the storage at the moment for another brew or restore or whatever you might need. We're holding on to that, and that's more so because I forgot to put it away, because we really won't be needing it to get through this floor 3. Now, floor 3 is probably the most challenging floor out of the 3, and then obviously there's Olm, which is a whole nother thing. But floor 3 is usually the part where people plank because, well, I mean, they definitely don't plank at Guardians. At least I hope not, If you're planking at Guardians, we might have to start from the very, very basics of this game, much less the raid. Anyways, Vasa can seem a bit weird, but especially with the blowpipe in our inventory right now, there's going to be a very simple strategy that will help you dodge the rocks that it throws at you. It's very, very simple, so we'll be showcasing that in just a second here. But first, we have to get through Guardians, and going back to what I was saying earlier, floor 3 being difficult, the reason is because once we're down here, there's not a storage chest. We can't just finish up Vasa and then get more brews or something like that, although Vasa does drop you 2 brews. But after Vasa, it's Mystics, which can hurt. There's strats to minimize damage, but sometimes Mystics are just rude and they can actually hurt you quite a bit. And then there's the dreaded Muttadile room, and that one just sucks. No two ways about it. Muttadile room just sucks, unfortunately. Okay. We are done with the Guardian's room. We're going to head into the Vasa room here, and we're going to try to execute the Vasa teleport skip here. We do get it. Very nice. So we get to skip the first teleport there. We probably will get teleported a few times, I imagine. So I was mentioning the strategy in which to avoid damage while keeping up your DPS, and this is it. You simply just attack the boss, you run a tile, you attack the boss, you run a tile, and you repeat. Just 2 clicks, or 2 to 3 clicks, right? I guess you click the floor, you click the boss, click the floor. No, that's 2 clicks, I can count. So like so. And I have overestimated just how strong a regular mode Vasa is, because we are absolutely destroying Vasa right now. So I suppose this might be a different story if we were actually using the rune crossbow. I suppose a blowpipe with amethyst darts in it is very, very strong. Now, we are absolutely flying through this. There's actually a brew on the ground that we don't even need to pick up. We're looking very comfortable right now. What I am going to do right now, in the interest of inventory space, so that I can actually equip my range gear, is I'm going to sip this enhance and drop it. We're going to swap into our range gear here. Salve on, and that mystic is in a bit of an awkward place. So we're going to switch into the rune crossbow here, and we're going to... Oh, that is something you want to avoid doing. Again, I'm actually just not accustomed to the short range of all these weapons I'm using. But yeah, we're going to switch to the crossbow here, just so we have a bit better range, and we can drag this mystic over. And then we'll run through the room. I'm actually not sure which is better DPS here between the rune crossbow and the blowpipe, but both of them seem to be doing decent damage. We're going to go ahead and resummon our Thrall. So how you mitigate damage here against these mystics is you try to get them to melee you, or like path to melee you. You don't actually want them to melee you, otherwise they're going to box you like they're Mike Tyson. What you want to do is set them up on these corner traps right here, to where the game thinks they can reach us, but really they can't, and they get a little confused. They'll occasionally throw out a mage hit instead, but all of this time they're actually trying to path and melee you, except they got short arms, they can't reach you from these diagonal tiles, and that's the gist of it. So we're gonna finish off this mystic here, and then we're gonna try to get our health up, because the next room is Muttadile room. And what we're going to want to do is swap into some tanky gear here. In our case, I want to say it's just our range gear, maybe the fire cape on. Actually, we don't want the fire cape on because we do still kind of want to hit the Muttadile here. And in our specific setup, the best weapon to use right now is actually the trident. And what we're doing here is chopping the tree. Every time we get an EXP drop, we can safely hit the Muttadile, and we can also brew if we want, or restore, whatever you need to do. And then immediately click back on the tree. You want to try to get this Muttadile as low as you can, above 50% anyways, because if it falls below 50% before you're done chopping the tree, then what's going to happen actually is that it's going to heal from the tree, which is something you don't want. What we want to do is equip our Amulet of Fury. The salve doesn't do anything here. It's really only for the Mystics room. And then on to the Muttadile. I will say, in a normal baby CM, or just, you know, normal chambers in general, the Muttadile room is much, much more humble than CMs. You're going to be in for a rude awakening when you run into challenge mode and you get to this room. There's no other way to put it. It's just going to be very rude. It's going to be entirely different. Okay, that is Muttadile down. We're going to want to make sure we have a fresh enhance and overload. And then we have a revet on the ground, but you know what? I'm not even going to worry about it. So I prepped more than usual, and as it turns out, we don't even need the extra prep. We're going to have so many brews in our storage unit. And let's say you're less experienced at the raid. Well, the numbers I prepped, I think it's going to be more than enough even for you, because we have 6 brews in our inventory right now. And let's go ahead and check how many there are in the storage right now. There's still 10 brews. In a solo, do keep in mind, you know, you have access to all the brews and potions in general that drop to the ground in this raid. So, you know, something like Vanguard's room, like think about how many potions there are in that room alone. So we're going to be putting the Fang away, although there is a way to use the Fang at Olm, but it's a little bit more... I don't want to say difficult, it's definitely just a different method that is like less obvious to get in cycle for. And then we're going to go ahead and put away the blowpipe as well. There's a lot of things we don't need here. There we go. And then overload, enhance. We're going to take like... We have so much inventory space in this minimalistic gear setup, but if you're bringing more switches, I do recommend at least 2 revets and then at least 5 brews. But I mean, look at the situation we have right here, right? We have way more than that. But all right, we're going to go ahead and re-overload and enhance. Even those things were already running. This is just to maximize your resources. And why I dropped the brew and restore earlier as well is so that we can heal up all the way, both our HP and our stats, and then get fresh batches of those potions. And then let's go ahead and get ready for Olm here. Dragon Warhammer spec. Unfortunately that misses, but the beauty about camping a light bear is that we're going to have a ton of spec back. So we're unafraid to send the second hammer spec there, and then our spec will just continue to regen all this time. Now, in talking about gear switches, I highly recommend a melee ring, so like a berserker ring or an altar ring or something, to pair with your light bear. It is very worthwhile. But if you're struggling for switches, a light bear camp is not too bad, or a melee ring camp is not too bad. Like going like for either of those is not the worst thing in the world. The most optimal thing is to bring 2 rings, but if that's not something you're ready for yet or just simply don't want to do, just camping one of those 2 rings is not bad at all. So right now we're doing the 3-0 mage method, and I mean this video is mostly to showcase the baby CM layout, so I would hope that you have a decent understanding of Olm. I will say though, once again, a normal layout or a regular Chambers of Xerix Olm is much more humble than a challenge mode. It can hit you quite hard in a challenge mode, but the mechanics remain the same, right? So if you just practice the mechanics and get a good hold of that, then it should transition into the challenge mode quite well. So we're just going to be employing the 4-to-1 method here. Let's see if we're in cycle. We're not. It attacked twice. So what we're going to do is 3-to-1 here. And now I do believe we are in cycle. Now the 4-to-1 method I'm doing right now is a slightly more advanced method, and this is just to ensure we skip potential flame walls. So what we're doing right here instead is we're getting 2 attacks in at ring finger, and that's why we're also getting autoed at ring finger. When you first learn the 4-to-1 method, I'm going to try and showcase it on this next cycle here. When you first learn it, this is what it looks like, right? You're going to attack on thumb, you're going to attack on ring finger, and then you're going to move to the thumb, and you stay here for 2 hits. But right here, standing still, you don't want to do that, because that's when you can potentially get caught in the flame walls. And using the 3-0 mage method and this 4-to-1 method, thralls are very important, so you're not going to have waters. And if you learn the flame wall skip, then you won't have to bring like a violin or or something like that, right? Or like maybe not use thralls and bring waters from your spellbook. So very worthwhile to learn the proper flame skip 4-1. We land our hammer there, very nice. Make sure we get our mage thrall out. And if we're doing the mage method correctly, we should be taking no damage, so we don't even need the overhead at all, the pre-mage overhead. Now, I will say more on the baby CM layout. Objectively speaking, points per hour, I do think this is one of the best methods of obtaining points per hour. So, there's a lot of factors that come into play whether you want to run a CM or a baby CM or even regular layouts. The pluses for running the baby CM or even a CM is that it's actually less cost in terms of your supplies. Like, you don't need to bring in a combat potion, although you might want to pre-pot that obviously for Tecton. You don't need to bring range potions. You don't need to bring your own brews or revits. You pretty much need none of that. I mean, if you want, if that, like maybe bring a couple of pieces of hard food just in case, but really not needed the more experienced you are. Because of the way the layout is set up, you can do Tecton with pretty much no supplies, Ice Demon with pretty much no supplies, and Shamans with pretty much no supplies. And then you prep for the rest of the raid. So you don't need your own brews or anything like that. But the downside, obviously, is that this takes much longer, right? But that's why the baby CM layout may be better than running an actual CM, because things have less defense in the raid, but it's still a long raid, long enough to where currently, you know, we have 38,000 points. You're not going to obtain 38,000 points in a... Oh my... I was too busy talking. You know what? We haven't been running very good example videos lately, but I'm going to keep this in the video because, you know, just to be transparent, things are not going to go well. And also, when you're too busy talking, things are not going to go well. But again, we're using pretty down bad gear and we're too busy talking, so we're not, you know, really playing to our best here. You know, I can't imagine you guys are also going to be doing this raid sitting by yourself, talking to yourself, so your attention is probably going to be a little bit more on the actual raid. But I will say, though, dying in 2 or 3 of my last example videos is probably not doing myself any favors. But hey, you know, it is what it is. I mean, that wasn't something that I just, you know, died too simply. I quite literally was just not paying attention. But we were trying to get in cycle there and the portals came out, but I was lost in my own thoughts there. But yeah, so much so I actually forgot what I was talking about, so... Oh, the topic of baby CMs being worth it. There we go. Okay, so I do think it's the most points per hour, and some fellow commenters, some fellow viewers have pointed that out as well. But the reasons to do challenge mode is obviously for the kits, the ancestral kits, the dust, the KCs count towards the KC capes, because in this raid specifically, challenge mode are the only ones that count towards the KC cape. This is not the case for Theater of Blood, for example, where normal KC and hard mode count. So that's a factor as well. And with the recent Chambers of Xerix changes, it's even more so in challenge mode. So the rates are just that much better in challenge mode. So that's something to consider. But again, this is an extreme example. I highly would not recommend jumping into challenge mode in this type of gear. But for a regular baby CM, this is, you know, honestly, this is going pretty smoothly, right? You know, apart from us not paying attention and getting wrecked by the portal. That did 45 damage to us. But we are on to P3 here. We managed to pick all our potions back up, no problem. But yeah, live commentary here, honestly, right now, working on P3. Very much considering pretending like this never happened. This video will never see the light of day. We simply re-record it in a flawless run, and you guys would never know. But, it is what it is, right? The only thing that sucks here is that we're not going to see the true points that we're going to get. But off the top of my head, I do believe it's like 48,000 points or something. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, I don't really run baby CMs, honestly, because by the time this came out, because baby CMs did not always exist, I was already running challenge mode. I already had decent gear, so this was not something for me. In fact, personally, I had really questioned, you know, I'm like, why is this even a thing? Like, why don't people just jump straight into CMs? But, I mean, we're showcasing why this does have its place. It's a good learning tool and a good in-between. There's pros and cons to it. Okay, let's be careful here. Let's not be too focused on talking here. Let's get these hammer specs down. Might as well with the light bear. We get 3 hammers on the hand. Very nice. Oh, let's turn on our overhead. Forgot about that. Humble 0. We got it wrong anyways. It was prey range. Let's make sure we use our stamina. Yeah, between what just happened here with teleport and then also the shaman room, it's like examples of what not to do. You know, everybody shows you what to do, but sometimes people don't show you what not to do, you know? Since it's P3, we do have to be very careful here about finishing these 2 hands in or within a time frame. There we go, melee hand down. Let's swap into our mage gear. 1 more hit. Olm's being quite rude. Let's transition to our range gear now. Oh, and we get a ruby to start with. That's nice to see. Overload runs out, so let's go ahead and get that rolling again. Enhance as well. Let's be very careful here. Oh, another ruby. Oh, back-to-back rubies. Incredible. So, we're using a rune crossbow, and, you know, if you don't have a T-bow, the next best thing is a Dragon Hunter crossbow, which, you know, you get from this raid. So if you're farming this raid, you might not have it yet, right? You're here for a reason. You're here for the Dragon Hunter crossbow. You're here for the Twisted Bow. But there is an in-between, which, well, actually, there's a couple in-betweens. An Armadillo crossbow, but honestly, obtaining an Armadillo crossbow is not a very meta path. It's more of a niche item, as weird as it sounds. Like, you really have to go out of your way for it in God Wars. But there's also the Dragon crossbow, which is not as good, but also same concept. It's kind of out of your way. Farming rune dragons, especially from a Ironman perspective, is probably quite rough. Oh, another ruby, although we kind of don't want those now. Oh, another one. Oh, another one. Make it stop. You know, you never get rubies when you want them, and then you just get all of them when you don't want them. But there we go. 33k points after a plank. We got some Irid Seeds and Addy Ore. And this was not the perfect showcase, but honestly, not perfect showcases are probably better showcases because everybody's going to make mistakes, right? Runs are not going to go perfect, and this was a good example of that.